afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first Intuition Attitude Festival. This is day one of our festival of events, and today we have branded as Financial Accounting Day. So all of the sessions today are themed around financial accounting concepts, ideas, and at this lunchtime session, we're going to be thinking about a career in financial accounting. My name is Ben Borman, so I am a tutor and a director at First Intuition. I actually studied the AAT qualification myself, working for a practice firm many years ago now, and used that as a stepstone on to go and do my ACCA qualification and exams. But I'm joined, and I'm really happy to be joined by a panel of three. And it's unusual for me, but the panel today are three people that I've actually had the pleasure of teaching at various points in my teaching career and in their study journey. So I will introduce them one by one and give them a moment just to say hello and good afternoon to everybody. Shall we start with Abby? So good afternoon, Abby Hartley. Abby is one of our current AAT Level 4 apprentices. How are you today, Abby?
Good, thank you. I'm Abby and I work at Washington Partners in the Bury St Edmunds office. I did my level 3 AAT and I also did the level 3 apprenticeship. And then I started level 4 in January. So I've done my first level 4 exam and I've got 6 to go before I'm AAT qualified.
Fantastic. And I hear you've just done the personal tax unit and you're preparing for the exam, Abby.
I did. I had a very good teacher for personal tax, and I've got my personal tax exam in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, no.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about you, your job role, how you got into it, and what you're hoping to do with your AAT qualification. But I will introduce our second guest for the lunchtime session and say hello to George Riding. George works at RSM. Hi, George. How are you?
Hi Ben, yeah, not too bad, thank you. Pleased to be here. My name's George. I work at RSM in Bury St Edmunds. I'm an audit assistant manager. I've been with the firm since about 2015 after completing my AAT studies with another regional firm in Suffolk. So I did my level 3 and my level 4 before progressing on to ICAEW, the ACA qualification with First Intuition, and as Ben mentioned, yeah, he was one of my tutors, got me through my studies. Yeah, qualifying in December 2018.
Fantastic, thank you, George. And I remember all of those stressful nights of revision, helping you prepare for those exams. But you did yourself and the firm and us at First Intuition proud, fully qualified, and now loving life as an assistant manager for the firm that you studied with, which I think is great. And we will hear more about that as we go through the session today. But I'm going to introduce now, last but by no means least, my third guest for this afternoon is Sam Rumans. Sam works for a firm called Cottons over in Northamptonshire and is currently studying ICAEW, having done the AAT qualification himself. Good afternoon, Sam.
Good afternoon. Yes, hi everyone. I'm Sam. Nice to meet you all. I think Ben's given me a fairly good introduction there, so I don't think I need to say a great deal more. But yes, I've studied AAT and now got my final exams for ACA coming up this summer. Rather scared, I have to admit, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
And hopefully, Sam, if everything goes to plan, you will sit your final exams in July, and that will be full qualification for ICAEW, which would be a fantastic achievement. So a few housekeeping bits before we get into the session in real terms today. First thing I would say is we've got a live audience on Zoom. Hello, thank you for joining us. If you want to ask questions as we are going through, can I ask you to use the chat box function in Zoom? Feel free to ask questions in there. I can't promise we can come to everybody's question today because we've got quite a lot of people joining live. But hopefully I can spot some questions in there. And if I think it's appropriate, I will then ask our panel and I can chip in as well and give you my thoughts on any questions. So please use that. We like these sessions to be interactive. I am also recording the session, so we can send out a link to the recording after the event. And so if you don't want your background noise to be picked up, I would encourage you to stay on mute, because it does make the listening experience better for everyone joining live and listening to the recording. Shall we get going with the session for real? So we're talking about financial accounting. And that was my background. Before I started teaching for FI, I worked for a practice firm of accountants. And I personally like to think about financial accounting being anything to do with year-end stuff. Now, it might be a bit broader than that, but I think it really falls down to 3 areas in my experience of doing it. So year-end accounts preparation, helping produce the statutory accounts for the business and the business owner. Secondly, it then potentially involves the audit of those financial statements. And that was my background, specifically working in an audit department where we would go in as an independent firm of accountants and audit the statutory accounts produced for the year end of a company. But thirdly, it does touch on elements of taxation. It tends to be back on the back of the financial accounting reports that have been prepared, that the business will then process their year-end tax computation and file those with regards to the tax authorities and making sure they are paying the correct amount of tax. So we've got an expert panel, as I say, and the whole point of today really is to give people listening, joining the session or listening back to the recording, a bit of an oversight into the world of financial accounting, how you maybe go about getting a career in that particular area of accounts, and what it might entail on a day-to-day basis and in conjunction with your studies. So first question going over to the panel, and we'll start with Abby. Abby, tell us a little bit about your experience of doing the qualification as an apprentice, because I understand you've been signed up to the apprenticeship scheme by your employer.
Yes, so I did the level 3 apprenticeship when I started working in 2019, which I finished in September last year. And the apprenticeship goes alongside studying for your AAT qualification. So the last exam you take of your level 3 AAT also goes towards your apprenticeship qualification alongside a portfolio and an interview you have, which shows what skills you've developed in the workplace. So the apprenticeship works on sort of soft skills that you may require in your job. For example, communication. So when I joined Whiting & Partners, I had a part-time job before, which was mainly face-to-face communication, which I developed through there. But the apprenticeship has developed more of my skills. For example, at work, if I'm on the phone to a client or I have to communicate via email, the skills days at First Intuition, been able to learn more on these skills, which hopefully in the future, as I have more client communication, will improve hopefully.
Definitely, it's something we've seen a lot of as the apprenticeship schemes have become more popular. I think traditionally the technical side of studying has always been embedded into the AAT and then beyond into the chartered qualifications. But the apprenticeship draws not only on the technical skills needed to be an accountant working in practice and in a financial accounting role, but also those other impact skills, the communications you mentioned, particularly relevant in a practice context where you are dealing with a range of different clients. You've got to communicate effectively with them, asking for information as well as providing them with resources. So if I can come to Sam next, because Sam, you've gone on and taken the apprenticeship to a whole new level because you've been doing your ICAEW under a level 7 apprenticeship, haven't you?
Yes, and it provides a really good sort of follow-on. I think the best aspect I've found of doing the kind of AAT and then ACA route is the interplay that you have between your day job and the study, and they kind of feed each other. So at first, very much found that I sort of, I think I did a few months of working and then started the AAT and learned a lot of stuff at work in that initial period, then added the AAT to the mix. And then I was finding that I was learning new bits from AAT that then fed back to my day job, where I'd see a certain thing on a certain client and think, ah, yes, I've done something on that at work very vaguely, then the AAT gave me the full understanding and explanation of what that element was, whether it be something to do with VAT, bookkeeping, financial accounting, as we've discussed. And then that journey through AAT, through the levels 2, 3 and 4 as I did, and then on to the ACCA level 7 apprenticeship, it builds itself, and it's like building blocks, one on top of another, on top of another. And it is a constant feeding thing that moves back and forth. It can move differently, I think, for some people. Some people might find that they go ahead, their study moves further ahead of where they're at with work, and other people, their work can go a bit ahead of where they are with study. But generally speaking, it's a really, really good way to do things, where you're practically engaging with something one day, and then you're doing the technical side and learning about it another day, and kind of feeding back and forth.
And this is something we have seen a big appetite, particularly in firms of practice accountants, to take people and put them all the way through their professional qualifications using the apprenticeship levels. And it is very common now for somebody to maybe even start at level 2, and that's a program that we also run, but certainly the level 3 and the level 4 and then into the level 7, it means effectively from start to full qualification, you can do it now with the support of the apprenticeship running alongside, which I think is fantastic, and something that has really, really changed the training that we're able to offer the firms and the students that come to us. So final panel member on this one is George. So George, you're in the position now that you've fully qualified, and part of your role at RSM is supporting the AAT apprentices as they now do their study. So I wonder, from your perspective as a training manager representing a firm, how have you seen the apprenticeships help your studiers and the firm to make sure they're getting the skills that they need?
Well, I think both technically and, as the other guy said, both in the sort of softer skills, communication absolutely is fundamental to everything we do. We're not, sometimes there's a stereotype that accountants are siloed, but that couldn't be further from the truth. You work in a team full of people, you need to communicate with them effectively to get audits signed off, accounts prepared, tax returns submitted, and you need to communicate with the client as well. And translate financial information to people who aren't financial members of the finance teams. So the soft skills for our students are massively important and go a long way in turning them into well-rounded members of the accountancy profession. But even on the technical skills, some of the things that I learned at level 3 and level 4 stay with me now. So I can be looking at something that's quite complicated, but you always bring it back down to the basics, your debits and your credits, which is one of the first things that you learn at level 3. So that's where I still use it, and absolutely that's what I encourage our students when we're working together on jobs throughout the year, audit jobs. You always ask them to bring it back to the basics. So it's a massively useful qualification, and both the soft skills and the technical skills are useful throughout your career.
Fantastic, George. So as you can see on the screen, this session is AAT approved. And so for the next part, I think it would be good if we could discuss the AAT's role in developing the careers, because one thing that me included and you three have got in common is we all use the AAT qualification as our entry point and our start point into our careers, and we've gone on or will hopefully go on, in your case Abby, to develop that career beyond AAT. So let's bring it right back to the start. What caused you to decide to study the AAT, and how do you think the AAT qualification itself has helped you in those early stages of your career? Abby, over to you. What was your background knowledge of AAT before you started work? Had you made your mind up you wanted to be an AAT qualified accountant?
Yeah, so I did some work experience in my summer holiday before I finished college. And went to work at Whiting & Partners, and when I was at work experience at Whiting & Partners, they explained how the sort of training package works. So how you study AAT first and then go on to further study. and because I had done A-levels, I was able to start on level 3, and then I chose to work in corporate services, which is audit and general practice, so I'm half and half at the moment. And because I sort of wasn't in a tax-based role, I was advised to do AAT instead of AATitude, which is the sort of tax equivalent qualification. And then obviously after I finished level 3 AAT, I was able to move on to level 4, and going into working in practice.
I think we might have lost Abby for a second there. I'm sure she will rejoin, but shall we move on to Sam? So Sam, is there anything particularly from your AAT studies that stands out as being useful in your practice role and the firm that you work for?
Yeah, I would say that the most crucial bit that I remember from AAT is learning how a full set of accounts is built from the ground up. I think you're, yeah, sorry, I thought you just frozen there. Yeah, getting an idea and understanding of how a set of accounts is built from the ground up, be that for a company or be that for a sole trader or a partnership, and just getting that understanding from the most basic of levels and understanding where every little bit fits in. And, you know, ultimately I think as George was saying, it's everything that we do, it does boil back to the absolute basics, to debits and credits, to money in or money out. It is as simple as that. And so seeing how things fit together and understanding the template that you can then place onto anything was absolutely crucial, because everything else I've done is just built on top of that and added to that. It's only ever, you know, the complicated bits that we do are only ever because there's maybe more elements to something, or there's a couple of different strands to something, but it all ultimately does boil back to those same things.
I think that's exactly right, Sam. And it's something as a tutor I see when students go on, and I've got a mixed class then doing an ACA course, for example, I usually can tell which one of that class have done AAT before, because I just feel they've got that more fundamental from the ground up understanding that you mentioned. And that was echoed in a case study exam. So the final exam for ICAEW a couple of sittings ago, where the examiner just posed quite a nice question really on the implications of this business having a customer go bust, and the need for a bad debt provision and adjustment to consider the implications of that. And the feedback we got from the examiner was, on the whole, that question was answered horrendously by ICAEW finalist students. But I took a lot of confidence in the fact that the vast majority of our students were AAT qualified, and they would know exactly how to explain the concept of a bad debt to a client. They would know the debits and credits for it. They would know how that would therefore be reflected in the statutory accounts. And it's that kind of ability to not only understand how something works, but explain that to someone else that I think the AAT really does give you in the written task, particularly that you come across at level 4. George, if I can come to you for a second, the AAT role within RSM. So RSM, big firm of accountants, but using the AAT across lots of your office locations as an entry point for your school leaver program. How do you see the AAT fitting in with your study plans?
I think it's, well, quite simply, it's an integral part to our plans to bring a mix of students from different backgrounds, different levels of experience. Some will get both a graduate intake and a school leaver intake. School leavers will typically be with the firm before qualifying ACA for 5 years, whereas school leavers will be, graduates will then be with us for maybe 3 years before they then qualify. So, between the two, there are pros and cons of both, but school leavers give the firm a lot more time and then build up a great deal of experience before fully qualifying. And yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, really. We've got people within the firm who have made sort of promotions to managers, directors, partners, who have got the AAT qualification, sort of homegrown. And yeah, it's integral, really. I don't think that when you get to that senior level that you can tell one from the other, really. So it's really sort of at the starting point where you've got maybe someone who's been with the firm for 2 years, completed their AAT, and then there's a graduate maybe that comes in, having been at university for 3 years, but obviously the experience that that AAT student has developed over those initial 2 years with the firm is invaluable, really, through working with clients, doing their studies, understanding from the ground up how things are sort of calculated and how the audit files work in my sector line is massively valuable as well.
Brilliant. I can see a few comments coming through in the chat box, which is great, and I would encourage the live Zoom audience to keep asking questions in the chat box. A few people coming at the angle of how would we go about getting our first role. So I'd be interested in hearing your experiences. If I can come to Abby, I think your sound is back with us, Abby. Abby, how did you get your first role? You mentioned work experience to start with. How did you go and get some work experience and then get a first role?
Yeah, so when I was at college, I wanted to make use of my summer holidays and half terms. So I actually did, I sent an email to local firms to see if they were offering any work experience placements. And then I had a response from 3 different companies, and they all said they did offer work experience. So at the companies, I then went in for an interview to talk about doing work experience, and from that also from work experience, if I could, they offer apprenticeship opportunities after that. So when I came to Whiteson & Partners for work experience, I was talked through all the AAT qualification, how it worked, how their training system works, and then I was given some I think I did a bookkeeping job when I was on work experience, and it kind of gave me an insight into accounting and if that was going to be something that I wanted to look into, because when I was at school, obviously I didn't have any knowledge of accounting. I'd studied A-levels in maths, business and PE, so it was quite a range of different subjects, and because I knew I didn't want to go to university and that I could do accounting without going to university, it was definitely an option that I thought I needed to experience before I made a decision to go straight into accounting full time. So I think the work experience definitely gave me a good experience of what it would be like to work in financial accounting.
That's great to hear. I understand for people listening that the work experience hasn't maybe been what it would have been for the last 15, 16 months with COVID. But I hope as firms now start coming back out of the lockdown restrictions, that things like work experience programs will kick back up again. And I particularly liked your point there, Abby, about you said you took the initiative and contacted local firms. And I think that's something I hear a lot. Oh, there's no work experience opportunities. I believe there are, but you just have to put in a bit of perseverance and a bit of taking the initiative to contact people directly. Try and contact as many firms in your local area as possible and say, I would love to come in for some unpaid work experience for a couple of weeks just to get a feel for what it's like. Sam, if I can turn to you now, how did you get your first role within the accounting field? Did you do any work experience in the lead up to it, or did you just apply and get straight?
Yes, I didn't do any work experience. Just on the point though that Abby's making about emailing out to firms, you know, that is a really, really big thing. If you are seen to be someone that has been as proactive enough to actively contact firms and be the first person to come to them, they're going to look at you in a really, really positive light because they see you as someone that wants to make a change for themselves and do well for themselves. And that is, you know, doing that sort of thing could potentially put you ahead of a lot of other people in the field. Just as a general point, but yeah, in terms of my own circumstances, so I was in 6th form at school in Northampton, and I had a meeting with my careers advisor. Everyone got a meeting lined up at some point. I think it might have been in the lower 6th initially, and we kind of had a bit of a chit chat, and I sort of said, maybe interested in something to do with finance. Not sure exactly what, but I've always liked kind of numbers and maths and that sort of thing. But also wanted something kind of client facing or human facing, to do with people. And anyway, I was one of the people that decided to put a bit more effort into talking to the careers advisor. Lots of people in my year, I remember, were quite pessimistic about it and thought, oh, we're not going to get anything out of this. What's the point? But I was kind of dead set on getting something because I didn't really want to go to university. And therefore I thought, well, let's see what I can get. And finally, something came through from Cotton's Accountants, where I still work now, a letter from the managing partner, Nick Warren, offering interviews for a position to study the AAT. And careers advisor came to me first because I was the person that had shown an interest in it, sent in a CV, went for an interview, got the job, and that was that. And I'm still here today after all these years.
As simple as that, Sam. That's fantastic. And finally then over to George on this one. Obviously RSM, lots of offices across the country. You've got quite a standardized process, haven't you, for people applying to get onto your AAT training program? I don't know if you just spare a couple of minutes to talk us through what would be the standard route into RSM.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background was I qualified AAT with a different firm, and I became aware of sort of opportunities at RSM, and I applied and went through various stages of interviews, etc., as you would do normally for any role. And was successful in that respect. But previous to that, I was aware of the firm generally because they had hosted open evenings in the local office in Bury St Edmunds, which I'd attended. And you got to hear from various people in each of the departments, so audit, accounts, tax, VAT, who and they were both senior individuals within those departments and also students who had joined. So that was a great opportunity to understand, what the firm is like and what the qualifications are like and all of those important things that you need to know when you're making your choices and weighing up where to go and what to do. But yeah, as you mentioned, Ben, we have sort of a formalised process where you apply online and you go through various sort of questions, tests, interviews, video interviews before you then reach the stage where you would have a face-to-face interview. Obviously with COVID, that's been somewhat curtailed, and now it's a video interview over Teams with some members of the audit team or the accounts team, depending on who you've applied, what role you've applied for. So we've hosted some of them this year, and they've been really great. It's been nice to see people sort of applying for the various roles and their varied backgrounds and their passion, understanding their passions really, because at the end of the day, whilst the numbers are incredibly important, this is absolutely a people business when you're dealing with audits. You're out talking to clients. You're asking questions, challenging questions. So yes, absolutely, you need to have that technical expertise, but which comes over time when you do things like the AAT qualification. That absolutely is fundamental to that. But at the end of the day, it's a people business, as I say, and you've got to have that sort of that passion that you need to be happy with talking to people and going out and doing various bits and bobs really, like we are today. So yeah. I think that's the process that we go through.
It's really reassuring to hear. You guys obviously work for different firms, and they are three great firms that offer training contracts to staff, but by no means are they the only three firms doing it. There are firms of chartered accountants across the country, and one of the great things about our industry, and particularly in practice firms, is there is a clear progression. Usually every year, the year ones need to step up to take some year two work away from the year threes, and everybody moves up, which is great for people coming into our profession because there's always a new intake coming through. So I think the biggest tip from that is contact. I would be Googling local firms of accountants in my area, and I'm still convinced people just sit there waiting for jobs to come to them. And the world doesn't like that, I'm afraid. You have to go looking for the work. But we've seen, in testament to you three, that the persistence there does look through those entry point roles that can then be developed into further training and ongoing. So the whole of today is themed on financial accounting. So for the next round, let's touch a bit more on what that means on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis within each of your own job roles. So if I can come back to Abby first, what sort of stuff do you get involved with at work, Abby? What sort of tasks are you given on a standard week?
So as I mentioned before, I'm in audit and accounts. So I'm responsible for account services for a range of business clients, so sole traders, partnerships, and limited companies, sometimes small limited companies and sometimes bigger limited companies. So my role is quite varied, where some days I'll be doing VAT work or bookkeeping, accounts. For example, last week I was out on audit, so I'm not always at my desk, which I quite like. And yeah, I'm given a range of different work, so I'm able to experience different parts of accounting, and hopefully when as I progress, I'll be able to take on different types of work, and hopefully specialise. I'd quite like to specialise into different clients, for example, like agriculture, property. I quite like to experience different types of clients, and I think having that range at work allows me to gain exposure to different types of work, which is really interesting.
That was certainly something that I always really enjoyed about my time in practice, that the varied nature of the role. Just for anyone listening that doesn't fully understand what it means to work for a practice firm of accountants, we are taking clients' accounts or their records. Either they bring them to us. These days, Abby, I guess you get lots of clients that send you a backup of their computerized records and ask your firm to produce any statutory accounts for filing purposes. But I was excited to hear about you got out of the office, and that was something in the world of audit that I know has been a bit harder in the last year. But you were actually on the client's premises, were you, dealing with them face to face?
We were. We did have to wear obviously masks and everything, but it was really interesting to see, actually, because I went to the same client last year and the office was full, and when we went in, there was one person in the office last week. So it was really interesting to see how like COVID had affected the business, and you could clearly see that obviously everyone was working from home, and you could see from the work we were doing how COVID sort of had affected them. And yeah, no, it was good to get out of the office and some sort of normality, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a welcome change of scenery. Sam, if I can come to you next, just developing from Abby's point, obviously you've been with Cottons now for a number of years, which is great to hear. I guess from that perspective, it's given you a chance to build relationships with clients year in, year out. Abby mentioned going back for the second year. You must have some clients that you've been dealing with their accounts now for a few years. How do you like that area of working in a firm of accountants?
Yeah, it's really useful and interesting, because you get to sort of follow the journey of different businesses, and you get to see how they react to different times. And the interplay, you talked about interplay earlier, the interplay between what we're looking at in terms of figures and what's actually going on in the world outside need to be really close, and they need to be in tandem with each other. And so if you're following this journey with a business, you get to understand how things work for them, what their processes are, what sort of things do they do, how are they going to kind of react to different situations like COVID, for example, is really interesting to then follow through into sets of accounts. So, for example, at the moment, we're having to think constantly, okay, have these clients had grants from the government? Have they furloughed workers? Have they taken on a bounce back loan? Have they done this? Have they done that? The other aspect to it is, with a lot of these clients that we build a good constant relationships with, we tend to spend, rather than getting a bag of receipts and information at the end of a year, now it's very much a proactive approach that we take, in having contacts maybe quarterly with quite a lot of clients, and keeping on top of their balance sheet on a quarterly basis to see where things are at and what we can recommend to them, whether that be about how much money can they afford to draw out of their business, whether that be, should they be investing some money into a pension scheme, or into buying capital goods like machinery to make themselves more profitable in the future. All sorts of different things like that are really, really interesting. And that comes with time, that kind of being able to identify where there's opportunities for businesses. You get that by A, working with certain businesses for a period, and B, working with lots of different businesses to see how different situations affect things in different industries.
That's something else that really fascinates me, the different industries. I don't know whether you specialize in any particular industry, Sam, or whether, obviously not breaking any confidentiality with your client base, but what sorts of industries do you get involved in helping with that statutory accounting work for?
All sorts. I deal with people that are, man with van, to people that have tech companies and builders and anything, absolutely anything. We've got clients where we never actually see them in person. They're just someone that we talk to on a fairly regular basis, and they're based in London or somewhere, and we have contact over them because all they do is tech-based stuff. And then others, we've got clients in retail, that have obviously different challenges, and those are the types of clients where we tend to be kind of meeting them face to face more often, because they like that kind of people that work in retail tend to like that human side to it, and so they tend to prefer the face-to-face meetings and a bit more contact with us to get more of a feeling for things and take more kind of face-to-face advice. So it's very, very varied. I don't specialize in any particular area in terms of industry.
But it keeps the role very interesting, and I suppose broadening your skill sets to develop and improve your career in the future.
Yeah, massively. Yeah.
George, if I can come to you on this one now, your role similar, working for a firm of accountants, dealing with that external client relationship, but as an assistant manager, you're also managing the internal team at RSM. So your job role, quite intense from that perspective, I would imagine. Maybe just give us some insights into your standard kind of weekly task list.
Yeah, all I can say is it massively varies from day to day. I think that can involve things like liaising with clients, sort of on the project management side of things throughout their audit. It might be having planning meetings at the start of the audit phase, liaising with other service lines. So we'll have clients where we might do the tax and the accounts work. So working with those to make sure that we deliver essentially the accounts, the audited accounts as an entire package. Managing the staff as well, supporting them, which has become, is always important. But even especially after the last however many months we've been in lockdown and in COVID with the remote working, because obviously one aspect which is huge, as I've mentioned previously, is that team working aspect, and a lot of the stuff that we do is typically on site. And on that topic, I might go out on site maybe at the end of the week to review a file, how that's progressed, raise issues on the work, to ultimately make sure that we document the skepticism that we need to display for the purposes of our audit. We might go through and do budgets, forecasts, review for going concern, because obviously that's been a much more significant risk. So that's been a far more involved process over the last sort of 12 to 18 months than it may have been done previously. It's a lot of talking to people, more so. I've come away from maybe the detail where I used to be when I was an assistant or a supervisor, sort of leading jobs on site, to more managing people, managing the process, making sure we deliver all we need to. But it is as exciting. It's sometimes a shame to come away from the detail, because that's sometimes where you get really stuck into the numbers, and some people really love that. And I mean, I love that, but as well as the development of people, which really gives me a lot of job satisfaction. When people maybe come to you with a question because they don't understand something, and you're able to coach them and develop their understanding so that they can use that in the future, which is so rewarding.
It sounds like your role is as varied as Abby and Sam's, and I think that is what practice is all about, isn't it? I'd be interested, I'll start with you, George, on this one, but Abby and Sam, feel free to chip in after. How do you manage your time? What do you personally use or the firm use? Because it sounds like there is so much variation in your role that it could to an element of chaos, really, if you didn't have some kind of process. So what do you do, or what does the firm do to help you manage that?
So we have sort of like a job booking system nationally in the firm that we use to assign staff to different jobs at different points. So that'll be, I think, it runs for 6 months at a time, and we've got foresight of when jobs are going to happen, who's booked to them, their experience levels, and all of that. We then also have a local version that's specific to our office, our job, so we can see on a more detailed level who our team are and what they're working on effectively in the next few weeks. I myself, I mean, yeah, like you say, it can sometimes be quite chaotic when you're trying to manage various different jobs at one point in time with various different teams. And I use my Outlook calendar massively. I also have a little Excel spreadsheet that I record my time on, because obviously working in practice, you've got a web time, which is sort of how you book your time effectively to different jobs, which is not something you have to do in industry, but it's one of those necessary evils in practice to make sure that we keep track of how long we're spending on each of the individual jobs. So yeah, I guess that's how I track my time, and it's the same for the teams on site as well. We do budgets versus actuals and make sure that we're tracking everything that we're doing effectively. So yeah, and ultimately that helps identify if there's any areas for development. If there's something that's just potentially taking longer than we would expect it to, it flags that we can talk to them about it and see if we can coach them to develop that understanding of that skill in the future.
Fantastic. Sam, interested to hear your insights on that one. Do your firm use a timesheet system to record the time that you spend on the different clients in a portfolio?
Yes, yeah, we do use a timesheet system. So our day is split down into units of 6 minutes. So we have 75 units a day for a 7.5 hour day, which is very fun. It's something that you get used to after a little while, but it's important because you've got to be full and honest with the time that you're putting down on these jobs, so that the people that are managing you or the people that you are managing likewise, that we have a good idea of how long it takes to do the work, so that we can bill our clients in a fair and equitable and transparent way. Making sure, and if, as George was alluding to, if something's taking a bit longer than it does 1 year compared to the previous year, then that's potentially a flag that we can look into and say, okay, there's something not quite right there. Did someone need more training on something because they didn't understand it? Was there maybe an error in the time that was posted, etc., etc. On the other side of it, we also have a work planner system. We've got some custom piece of software that's been built, and it's like a calendar thing, and you just plan out and you drag and drop whatever jobs you're working on, whatever time's allocated to them. I tend to work looking forward by at least a couple of months in terms of my workload, just to make sure that things are planned in, because obviously you've got to consider, okay, I work for this one firm, but actually within the firm I work for 3 or 4 different partners across a week. There's jobs that I manage and oversee other people on. There's jobs that I do work that I'm managed on. There's non-chargeable time if we're doing training or we're doing CPD, and then you've got to think about your holiday time and your personal life and all the rest of it. And actually you've got to plan all these things together, and we do flexi time as well. So we, again, that's another aspect to it. So you've got to really, really keep on top of things. It's very fun.
Sounding like time management is a key skill for anyone wanting to get into the world of accounting in practice. Abby, on a similar theme, obviously you're studying alongside doing your day job. How do you manage the time between those two? Do you find you have enough time to do the work that your firm require you to do, but also keep on top of your studies and sit in the assessments for your AAT?
I do, yes. So similar to Sam, we have flexi time at work. So when I first started, I was doing 9 till 5:30 with an hour lunch. But I now come in at 8:30 and have half an hour lunch, meaning I finish at 4:30 and I'm home by 5 o'clock, which is quite nice. So this allows me to do exam revision, and sometimes at work, because there's another junior in a similar position to me, we sometimes revise at lunch, and my colleagues who have qualified or done AAT previously, they're able to answer questions. And sometimes before COVID, when we all sat in the canteen together, we had like little revision card sessions where everyone tested each other. So yeah, I'm able to manage my work and college time. But yeah, I think organisation and planning is really, really important skills to have in accounting, and especially during their apprenticeship. I'm able to work on them in their apprenticeship, which has really helped me for when I plan and organise my tasks.
We've talked about the entry into the profession and currently what you do day to day. Let's think about looking forward. And obviously you're all at slightly different stages of your career. So if I can come back to Abby, first of all, you're currently level 4 AAT, and I wish you the best of luck in getting that finished off over the next 12 months. What's the next step for you, Abby? How does your firm deal then with the progression beyond AAT? What do you have to do to move forward?
Yeah, so I would really like to go on and study further, so either ACA or ACCA. So my firm require you to sort of pick for yourself, do your research into each qualification, and I'm able to get advice from colleagues at work who have studied each one. And then we're required to present it to partners of the firm. And these are partners not from your own office. So you have to do a presentation on what.
Oh, I think we've lost Abby again, haven't we? Sam, if I could turn to you. So you're coming up to sit your final ACA exams. Once you've got through those, and fingers crossed results go well for you in the summer, you will be fully qualified. What do you see as your next step?
Yeah, so within the firm, we kind of, certainly in the last couple of years, we've started to create kind of pathways for staff members to follow through. And so we all have an appraisal every year, and we have interim meetings as well if we want to have them to sort of discuss where we're going and what we're doing. So once I've got through the exams, hopefully in July, and got the results in August, September time, I'll have a sit down with one or two of the partners to kind of discuss where I want my career to go, what kind of part of the role I want to continue, or whether I want to specialize into something or take over a certain group of clients, whatever that might be. And then also much longer term aims, whether I aspired to, partnership in the firm, whether I aspired to something else. So we're going to have that sort of conversation, hopefully in 3 or 4 months time, and then kind of get an idea as to where I want to be going and moving.
So I'm conscious we're talking about partners and the partnership, but just for anyone listening that doesn't really understand how it works in a firm of accountants, the partners are the owners of the firm, Sam, aren't they?
Yes. So they're the ones that own, have all the formal relationships with the clients, the ones that take profit share from the firm after all the income and costs have been put through. And so that's kind of the very top level, certainly within an individual firm, that you can get to. And so it's whether you want to, you aspire to that level or not, is up to you, I suppose.
Excellent. And finally, George, for you, obviously you've gone on post fully qualified, now holding a manager position at RSM. What's the career ladder onwards and upwards for you, George?
Oh, well, yeah, like I say, I qualified in December 2018. After that point, there were sort of just continued as normal, looking to take on more responsibility from the managers in the department, taking on more complicated sort of jobs, so listed work, etc., based upon my experience. I then did a secondment actually to our national audit technical team in London back in 2019, 3 months, and within that, just got involved in various projects, new accounting standards, and projects with the firm, to the audit faculty. That was quite interesting, really eye-opening, and gave me a lot of skills actually that I took back to audit when I returned. I then started to take on a manager role on various audits, ranging from manufacturing businesses to biotech, sciences, etc. And from clients that were, £1 million turnover to anything up to about 120 million, and listed and own managed businesses. So there's a wide variety there. My role differed depending on the job. So for the smaller, lower risk clients, I was taking more of a manager role, where I would be the focal point of contact for the client, reviewing work, etc., and hopefully delivering that end point of the audit to the client in the required time frame. So that's sort of where my sort of process or progression has taken me to now. I have a portfolio of clients that I work on. I also still support the senior managers in our department with the higher risk listed work, because that's my background. That's what I've worked on for the last 5-6 years, which I really enjoy. But then thereafter is sort of a progression to a formal manager role with manager title. Thereafter that, I guess, like with the others, it's progression to partner is the next step, and that's not for everyone. It's you are, as Sam say, you are the person who is receiving the funds from the business after they take out all of the expenditure, and ultimately you do take on the risk because you'll be signing off audits. Your name goes on the audit report, and that's not for everyone. And to be fair, I mean, as you go up in the firm, the number of positions gets fewer and fewer and fewer. But actually, despite that, once you qualify, my personal opinion is that the world is your oyster, really, in terms of jobs that you can go into, both practice and industry, and even, outside of accountancy. Both the AAT, ACCA, ACCA, all of these qualifications are so well respected, and the skills you get from them, both technical and soft skills, put you in such a good position to go and do anything that you really want to put your mind to. So I don't really necessarily know exactly where I'm going to end up in 20 or 30 years, but I know it's going to be a good experience anyway.
I really welcome the loyalty that all three of you show towards your firms, but obviously, as you just mentioned there, George, it doesn't mean that your career stops at the firm that you've trained with. We know plenty of students and colleagues of you three that have qualified and had a really great time and worked really hard for a firm, but then at some point have said, actually, I'd like to go in a slightly different direction with my career. And there are lots of people that then jump across to a more industry role, maybe working in an accounts department. And that is a very, very common route of someone qualifying with a firm, because with a firm, you get quite a lot of support with your training. You get the experience that you three have talked about of different sectors and different areas of accounting, and then take those and use those to then go and head up and hold very senior positions as financial controllers or finance directors in organizations. So I like to think that a financial accounting firm background really does suit for that development in any way your career takes. And who knows, you might turn up one day as a tutor teaching other people how to progress with their careers and their study. We're getting towards end of time for the session, so I'm going to come back with one final quick question, if I can, for each of you. Abby is back with us, so I'll come to Abby first and say, Abby, if there was one tip you could give to our audience today, or speaking to the young Abby Hartley about what you know now, what would be your biggest tip to somebody who is starting out in a career in financial accounting?
I'd say make the most of every opportunity you're given. For example, the work experience opportunities I was given. And I've also been invited back to my previous college and secondary school to do careers talks about going into financial accounting, similar to this one. And also mentor students who are in year 11 at my previous secondary school about going into business and finance. So I definitely think making use of every opportunity you're given really does make a difference to other people as well. Because if I had a mentor when I was in year 11, I would have found that so helpful to ask questions which perhaps at school you're not able to do to someone that in an industry that you're interested in, because you don't have access to you might not have access to someone you do want to ask questions to. So yeah, definitely that, I think.
Yeah, I echo two things that you've said there very, very much. I think volunteering for things, putting your hand up, putting yourself forward and getting out of your comfort zone is a real way to get yourself noticed, but opens lots of further opportunities. And I really like the thought of thinking not everybody has got somebody at home or in their circle of friends and family that you can ask about what's it like to be an accountant. Certainly no one in my family was an accountant, and I didn't really know what to expect, if I'm being brutally honest, until I'd turned up for day one in my first job role. So I think great if you can get into schools, into colleges to try and just spread the word and give a bit of experience as to what it's all about. Sam, quickly to you, if you were talking to your younger self, what would be your one biggest tip?
Communicate. Whatever it is, communicate. Talk about things, ask questions. If you want something, tell someone that you want something. If you're interested in something, tell someone that you're interested in it. If you're not sure about something, ask someone about it. If you're worried about something, talk to someone about it. Whatever it is, communicate. That is the absolute key, I would say, piece of advice if I was talking to 18-year-old version of me, whatever it be, whether it be a positive thing or a difficulty that I'm having, talk about it, communicate.
And ask. It's a big message. Never be scared to ask. Most people love to be asked questions because it gives them a chance to talk about something that they're knowledgeable on. And yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Don't be scared to ask for help, advice, opportunities, and take that proactive stance that you mentioned earlier. Start contacting all of the accountancy firms in your local area to see what opportunities are out there. George, if I could finish with you very, very quickly at the end of the session, what's your one top tip for yourself or anyone else interested in financial accounting?
Perseverance, I think. Absolutely, there are tough times whenever you go through a busy season or when there's something that's complicated that you might not understand, but having the ability to be resilient, essentially, to get through those tough times is a massive skill, really useful. And it's so rewarding when you come out of something and you understand it and you get it and you can apply that in the future. So I've learned so many things along the way. It's not always been easy, but I've come out the other side of it and I feel much better for it, and feel like my life has been enriched by studying for the qualifications that I have and doing the job that I have. So yeah, very positive.
That's a great message to end on. Perseverance, and the fact that's true learning and development, isn't it? We learn far more from the things that we fail or struggle with than we do for the things that go well for us, and they're actually the result of many fails in the run-up. So brilliant advice, all three of you. Thank you so much for joining me for the lunchtime session today. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, George. Good luck with the rest of your careers, but it sounds like you're all very driven and know what you're moving on to. For anybody joining us today, thank you for your time. Thank you for the comments in the chat box. And it's been lovely to see very much support for each other in the chat box today, where you've been sharing some of your own experiences, advice. That's great. Something we really applaud at our AATitude Festival.